So another way to describe ascension is a big remembering, because there was an illusion of separation, and then there's slowly a process of remembering and returning to wholeness. And I think part of the fractalization process, we can pick up trauma, we can pick up wounding, and that's kind of how we can believe the illusion that we're separate, because, you know, that person's a narcissist, or I wouldn't do that, or that person believes this and that person believes that. And that's, start creating these antagonistic kind of worldviews.
Welcome to Changing the Channel with Joe Garner, a show about shifting our individual and collective beliefs on what is possible for the future of humanity. As our understanding of how our reality continues to shift, we are at a point of reunification between science and spirituality. What does the world look like when we break free from the generational trauma that has kept most humans playing small for thousands of years and step into our full power as the co-creators of this reality? I always ask that you keep an open mind with this podcast. Ask yourself what resonates with my truth at this time and what does not. Respect your intuition, but see if you can get through the whole show, because there might be that little nugget buried deep in the conversation that unlocks something for you. Welcome back to Changing the Channel. I have a wonderful brother today, Kevin Tran. He is an inner work and ascension guide and also founder of Academy of Transcendence. Welcome to the show, Kevin. Really appreciate you coming on today.
Thanks, Joe. It's a pleasure to be here, and excited for our chat.
Excellent. Yeah, I came across you on Substack. We both have a Substack, and I noticed that we were writing about very similar ideas. And for those of you who are familiar with my Substack, it's all about the ascension and what's happening on the planet as it goes through this ascension that happens, every couple of thousand years or at different intervals. So I'm very curious to understand a little bit more of what you mean by ascension. What does the ascension mean to you? And what is happening as we go through this ascension?
Okay, well, big question. And I think it's a pretty multi-layered concept. So I'm just going to offer my personal interpretation, what I find the most, I guess, well, not only practical, but what makes sense to me. So I think if we just look at the word ascension first, we've got the word ascend in it. So there's a sense of going up or elevation. And I think to start, it's a process of evolution. So I think just really simply a process of evolution. And that takes place on many different spheres in many different kind of ways and expressions. So we can start with, let's start big, the evolution of a planet, the consciousness of a planet. So, a shift in the frequency, the raising of a frequency. We can go into, there's macros and micro levels of this. So if we come down to a civilization, so humanity as like a group of beings, an elevation values, more collective kind of unity. There's different expressions that characterize how humanity is, I would say, more unified in their focus and intention and connection, or more fragmented. And obviously, some expressions of that is conflict and war, and we can talk about that a little later. If we go even a bit more personal to the human, there is actually a transformation that's happening in our physical bodies. So I think there is an evolution of our of our of our physical vessel. And I think this has got to do with light and energy. So again, there's so many different ways we can talk about this. We can talk about it from on a cellular level, on a DNA level, going from a 2-strand DNA to a 12-strand DNA, and potentially even more. scientifically does that look like? There are people exploring that. It could be about light and energy. So it could be about the 7 chakra system expanding out into the 12 chakra system or the 15 chakra system. And again, just understanding what that unlocks in terms of human potential. I think if we talk about our consciousness and a shift in consciousness, one way to think about it is going from fear to love. And, these expressions of wholeness and unity. And those are key words that I think are really intrinsic to Ascension, because I think Ascension is like, what are we ascending to? And I think one way that's helped me wrap my head around that concept is, well, where did we come from? And I think this is kind of why Ascension doesn't necessarily need to take a spiritual perspective, because you can look at it from a scientific perspective. The evolution from a caterpillar into, its cocoon into a butterfly, it's a metamorphosis, and it's like states of transformation, quite distinguished in each, certain state. And I think similarly, the human right now on the planet at this particular junction and, special time on Earth, we have an opportunity to shift in energy, in consciousness, in physiology, um, with support from, cosmic energies, with support from other beings, with support from our spirit selves. So I think there's a, you can see there's different ways in to interpret this. But just to my point, where are we coming from? And this is why we take a spiritual perspective. My understanding is that we come from the same source. Like, people call it, you can call it God, you can call it source, you can call it universal consciousness. And I think one really interesting kind of, in different ancient wisdom traditions, in different esoteric traditions, they'll talk about cycles. So we know day and night, we know the season, we even have the equinox tomorrow. So, we have certain signposts in cycles. One important one is the precession of the equinox. How, the planet, the solar system moves through the universe and moves in and out of certain, I guess, seasons. In the yogic tradition, they refer to this as the yugas. So Satya Yuga, which is like the golden age, it goes down into its autumn, and then winter, and then spring. So you might have heard of the Kali Yuga, which is kind of the dark age, which is the iron age. So gold, silver, bronze, iron, and then it goes bronze, silver, gold again. So it goes back around. So this idea of wholeness, and I really want to, I love this question, because from wholeness, there is an anecdote, a story that source wanted to know itself, wanted to explore itself, wanted to see itself, wanted to meet itself. Because when you're everything, it's hard to kind of get a reflection back of like who you are, what you can be if you're, everything at the same time, every single potential all at once. So this idea that it started to separate, and through this kind of separation, it gets to explore states of, I guess, fragmentation, fractalization, individuality. And I like to think of this quest for seeking knowledge, seeking discovery, seeking realization, just like exploring the potentials of what you could be. And, they call this descension. So going from wholeness, descending down in frequency. And I think it's important to say that higher doesn't mean better, because if you're everything, your value would be to experience something that's more individual, or something more separate, or something more distinct, so that you have that reference point to upload back to, yourself, your higher self, your wider self, your more universal self, to say, oh, that's what it was like to be a planet. That was what it's like to be a star. That was like what it was like to be a certain civilization. That was what it was like to be a boy or a girl, poor, rich, greedy, and you can distill it down to so like a rock, a tree, a branch, whatever it is, distilling it to a cell, subatomic. And the beautiful thing about this is that through that separation, you get a unique individual experience. And I think we can relate to that because we're humans. We have primarily been in an individual experience of reality where we grow up, we learn this concept about me, you, I, and we go through life saying, you're different from me. How do I stand out? What's my purpose? What's my talent? What's success mean to me? Like, how do I want to show up? How do I want to define myself? And I can think these are also like questions and endeavors and like, explorations in creation. I think it probably gets to a point where creation is like, had so many lifetimes, so many different experiences that it goes, okay, we've separated so much that we've almost forgotten who we were. And I think this is kind of a beautiful thing because at that point, you get the opportunity to start remembering. So another way to describe ascension is a big remembering because there was an illusion of separation. And then there's slowly a process of remembering and returning to wholeness. And I think part of the fractalization process, we can pick up trauma, we can pick up wounding, and that's kind of how we can believe the illusion that we're separate because, that person's a narcissist, or I wouldn't do that, or that person believes this and that person believes that. And that's, you start creating these antagonistic kind of worldviews. So this journey back to wholeness, this remembering, this kind of reclamation of different parts of ourselves, we can do through our internal healing process as a collective. As a humanity, we do this through aligning to more community and more collective rather than power over. We're kind of like building a new system with power alongside of others. So more of a circle, less of a triangle. And I think this is kind of going back full circle to remembering, healing ourselves in this lifetime, tapping into past parallel future lifetimes, and then, starting to ask bigger questions like who else is out there in the universe and how are we related, how are we connected, and how are they also a part of us. And, there's a lot of beautiful principles and practices about, embodying more unity, less judgment, less attachment, less harm, that kind of thing. So we could talk about some of that a bit later if you like, but that's a little bit of I get a bit of a brain dump on how I think ascension is from a few different ways. Hopefully that covers some bases.
Yeah, I think that covers most of the bases, and I just have to say, when you're speaking, it's as if you're in my brain. You're saying the things that I have felt and known and understand, and it's really interesting that we're on opposite sides of the world. You're in Australia, I'm in America, and to have this connection to be drawn together to just almost experience, like I said, this very similar experience, but just slightly different, a fraction of a degree off, but we are so close. So if you've listened to a number of the episodes on the show, like what Kevin's saying is probably not brand new to you. This is the whole idea behind, changing the channel, is that you were moving into this different world. We're having this experience of ascension and how that all plays out here in humanity. So again, love everything that you said, from the macro all the way down to the subatomic, and, at the end of the day, all the way down to the light, the fact that everything is just this expression of waves that has fractalized itself into material, and that material is what we call reality right now, but only because we can only experience it through the five senses. So the five senses dictate what we call reality, even though there's just so much more. There's, the entire spectrum of the electromagnetic spectrum that we're only seeing, this little fraction for sound, and this little fraction for visible light, and this little fraction for the ability to feel, and then all the electromagnetic frequencies that are emanating through our body, through our nervous system, through our brain. All of that comes to create what we call our reality. And then to know that, again, I think it's just so important for people to understand that this planet is so unique. To have an experience of separation while also going through this transcendence and coming back into this wholeness. It's such a unique experience to have. I mean, from what I understand, souls, beings are clamoring to come here during this period because it doesn't happen very often in the galaxy, in the universe, for an entire planet to go through this gigantic ascension all together, and just to see how after at least 3,500 years of essentially warring states gaining power on each other, how does that civilization go from, essentially all the traumas, all the ingrained understandings that come with both the Western and Eastern cultures? How does that come together to create this kind of harmonious system or harmonious experience of ascension on the planet? So the journey to finding myself started with a shift in how I viewed my health. That is why I am proud to partner with Purium, the transformation company. What if you could support your health with a system designed for today's challenges? Purium is more than a supplement company. It's a solution for regenerative health. Their whole food products include the only clinically proven glyphosate detox, helping you eliminate the toxic buildup caused by modern farming. Pair that with Beyond Organic superfoods and the most efficient source of protein on the planet, and you've got a powerhouse combination to build muscle, improve digestion, and fuel your energy levels, all while promoting deeper sleep. Plus, Purium is mission-driven with planetary health in mind. They're proud to lead the way in a plastic-free movement using biodegradable packaging as much as possible. True health freedom starts here. Experience the power of this regenerative healing system for yourself and witness your own transformation take place. You get 60 days to try it, and if you truly don't feel any benefit, you get fully refunded. I have personally been using the daily Core 4 products and have noticed an increase in my energy and the depth of my sleep. Use the link in the descriptions to get started today and receive at least $50 off your first order over $75. I think the best thing to kind of bring the conversation back is, let's talk a little bit about that personal journey that people go through when they go through an ascension, when they go through an awakening, or, a dark night of the soul, which kind of kicks off that ascension process. For you, you talk a lot about kind of the inner work. So what does that mean to you? And what are some practical ways that people can do this inner work to help them experience a broader perspective of what is happening on the planet?
Cool. Good question. Okay, let's start with the fact that for most of our lives, we've been conditioned and programmed to look externally, to achieve external results, because we're part of the physical reality. What does success look like physically? What can I accumulate? What can I achieve? What can I gain? And when we start to consider more than our physical senses, more than the physical reality, like you were saying, when we start to learn about energy, really, there are different stages in us starting to interface with reality. and reality being a mirror for our internal world. So that's why I think inner work is so important, because once we make the flip from, chasing and striving and like building, which is still a really valid path, it's a very masculine energy path. And I feel like part of the context we're coming from is a pretty, like, I would say in some ways, a wounded masculine civilized, like, culture, patriarchy, capitalism. So you've kind of got this top-down structure where you've kind of got to exert a lot of force and energy and effort to like make things happen, to, and it's struggle and I guess tension and that kind of resistance, it's embedded in all of, it's embedded in everything, in the way that we work, the way that we have education, the way that we pursue any type of goal. So I think what's interesting is when we flip that, especially when we're talking about the more subtle energies, when we're starting to connect and reconnect and remember, more than just the physical reality. So the outer world being a reflection of our inner world. So we've got some esoteric sayings like as above, so below, as within, so without. And that kind of wisdom starts to make you think, okay, there are relationships with everything. And sometimes it's hard to affect the relationship externally because there's so many, factors, there's so many other people, there's so many different variables. So what about if we take that same relationship and actually focus on changing the things inside of us and then watching the external world respond to that? So inner work, I guess the reason why it's so valuable for me is because I was asking, my personal story is that I got myself into depression. I was like partying too much, taking too many drugs, having too much fun, really. I was like, hedonistic to, too hedonistic, really. And that was the culture, like, everything, it was like partying and alcohol and drugs and like festivals and music and raving and whatever. It's like for a young person growing up in a Western society, it was kind of the norm. And in fact, it was kind of like the most socially accepted. Like, I imagine it was similar in America. Come on, we learned from you guys.
Yeah, it was exactly like that. I mean, I remember there would be months that would go by where, I'm partaking in different experiences 3, 4, 5 times a week. And I would do that just for months at a time. I mean, we were enjoying ourselves over here just as much as the Australians.
Sure. Yeah, because I went over to London and then got to play around in Europe and dabbled in. It was a global kind of thing, socially accepted, alcohol being legal, and I guess just experiencing that and really, I guess really exploring that path, and then seeing what it did to my mind, seeing what it did to my emotional volatility, seeing how it made me, way more vulnerable to getting triggered, to having, stuff that I'd suppressed. That the truth is, and I'm not too hard on myself anymore because I didn't know how to deal with it. I wasn't modeled ways to, you know, actually process my emotions. I didn't know what that meant. As a guy, it's like, suck it up, man up and just like get on with it. Don't be such a don't be such a sissy. So there was so much. Australian culture is kind of like that, hey. So yeah, this kind of chauvinistic, I guess, jock like, and it was really interesting because as you explore spirituality, it's changing a lot now. It's getting a lot more accepted and mainstream. But like when I started exploring it, none of my friends were into it. They thought, crystals, astrology, and like all these different types of like interpretation methodologies are like, it's a little bit woo woo. It's a little bit like, you know, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make logical sense. And I guess that's part understanding that there are masculine and feminine. I think this is pretty important. I think the masculine is about active and doing and creating in that sense material. and the feminine is way more about receiving. And that's so beautiful because, like, how can you I've got so much to say about receiving and trust and faith and surrender, because it's like I had to learn about all those things because it's not the society, it's not what they tell no one teaches you these things. So, really, to create balance and to create harmony and to create strong being a co-creator of your life, you need the balance. You need the ability to play with both kind of energies. So, I wanna come back to your question because I think I can go down many different, things. So what is inner work? Inner work is self-awareness. Inner work is, going and looking at your inner world of thoughts, emotions, and energy. And I had to start there because it was mirrored back in my reality, in my struggles at work, in my certain triggers, in my relationships, really in my relationships. Just like seeing the partners that I was like attracting, and then the type of like what I know now is I can put labels to it, which is useful for me. I know that, we can get stuck on labels and we can identify, but for me to understand certain behavior pattern, like trauma bonding, like anxious attachment style, like, starting to learn like what, these are the gifts of psychology, but not not to be a psychology like, master's or an MD or a psychologist, or it was just how do I take that and make it practical? Like how does a normal human just use psychology like and feel like they feel empowered to be able to work through their trauma, their triggers, the limiting beliefs, the harsh inner self-talk. So I guess through that journey, it was a lot about what beliefs do I have? What judgments do I have on myself and others? What stories am I like holding? Where did I get these stories from in the first place? How are they connected to, how did I inherit them? Either from my family, my mother, my father, my society, my friend who I grew up with. And it was just a lot of questioning. And I think that that's one of the things that one of the qualities that is really, it'll take you really far when you're kind of doing your inner work is curiosity, like being open-minded, not being attached to an old story and kind of like getting rigid in that and or self-righteous, and being able to try on a different belief, like another pair of clothes, and say, what does that open up for me? What new doorway does that open up that old, set of clothes block me from? So I guess through that process, I probably spent 3 or 4 years just kind of like researching, experimenting on myself. And through that, I just cherry picked a bunch of the most practical, the ones that worked for me. Because there's a lot of ways. I think there's a lot of ways, paths to healing, and inner work is the path of self-awareness, I think. And yeah, I put together a framework. So whenever I got triggered, I saw it as an opportunity, as almost like the universe saying, okay, now you have the opportunity. Now is the moment for you to see this. And if you want, you can dig deeper. And the whole point of it is to usually a trauma. Okay. And I'll do some definitions now. Trauma is an experience that you find distressing or disturbing. Such a broad way. And we've got small t traumas, which are like kind of the things that are adverse life events. And then we've got the big T traumas, which are like life threatening, like the wars or the medical emergencies or the, near death experiences. So what I found really interesting is that I would say that, oh, I don't have trauma. But what I was overlooking was, the criticism or the judgments or the like bullying or the gaslighting or the, you know, uh, yeah, feeling like the hypervigilance, feeling like I had to tiptoe around certain people. And then you've got codependency and people pleasing, and you've got, a lack of boundaries. So all of these things started to unpack. And like the whole point of inner work is that you don't know what you don't know. And I was like always thinking like, what's my blind spot? Like I want to know what my blind spot is, but it's really hard to know what your blind spot is if you've never like been able to see it before or been aware of it before. So that was just this like curiosity. It's like, where am I not seeing something? And it was always just kind of, there was a little bit of humility there in saying, okay, I know that like I'm having friction in my relationships. I know that I'm not where I'm at with where I want to be with my career, but where am I responsible for that? And what change do I need to make in myself? What belief do I need, you know, redefine, rewire to be able to be available to a new reality? So I distilled that into my own framework called the 8 pillars of inner work. And just really quickly, there's like ego work, emotional intelligence, which is about the nervous system, um, healthy boundaries, which is really important, shadow work, which is all about where we judge ourselves and others. There was emotional embodiment, so that was like learning how to actually move emotions and energy through the body to like release it. Um, there was inner child work, which is really at the heart of a lot of our own healing, because as an individual, as an adult, going back and like, you don't need to relive the trauma, but understand why it's kind of staying with you, understand what need wasn't met. And instead of blaming or holding other people accountable and waiting for them to give it to you, you could be waiting a really long time if you really expect other people to change for you. So how do you change your interpretation of that event? And how can you give yourself what you were waiting for? And that's such a healing process. There's reparenting. There is, mother and father wounds as part of that. Yeah. So there was this whole part of my life where I just really wanted to clean up and liberate. I think liberation, empowerment, these are words that I would associate with inner work, but then also translating trauma into embodied wisdom. You've lived through it. You've experienced the emotions. You know what it's like to think like that and to be in that state. How do you glean the spiritual lesson? What's the theme? What's that overarching, what's that overarching lesson that you can extract from it, so that not only do you understand it, you can see it in others, you can embody a different kind of state, and then you can mirror back to them a different potential, a different way of, moving through life. And I think that's the really healing thing. If you've inherited certain things from your family, a little bit of context, my family came from the Vietnam War. So both of them were war refugees, and they came to Australia for new life, had to learn English, all that kind of stuff. So I not only took a lot of their limiting beliefs on, and I think genetically there's probably things that I absorbed through their DNA. And from a soul level, I know that I chose my parents. And I think part of it was to say, here's a bunch of junk that, your parents were in survival mode. They were like trying to pay the bills. And, it's to a point where, okay, these are the things that I've inherited and are in my subconscious, that were downloaded into my, I don't know, impressions, that were downloaded into my belief systems and worldview. And slowly as an adult, you're starting to recognize where they create self-sabotage for yourself. And then I guess full circle, when you've done the healing, you can mirror back to them, hey, you're dealing with perfectionism in this way. You're really harsh on yourself and controlling, with your inner talk. That's how you're projecting it out to other people around you. But once you catch yourself and you witness your mind and your ego and your inner critic speaking, you can learn a lot from that. You can see what the core wound is beneath it all. And you can understand that other people's behavior is kind of an expression or a reflection of their own, I don't know, craving for love. Or I think I'm curious. Yeah, I guess you've gone through.
Lack of love. Yeah. Are you seeking a path to inner peace and personal transformation? Check out my website, where I offer free weekly guided meditations designed to help you reconnect with your inner self and navigate your day with mindfulness. Whether you're new to meditation or looking to deepen your practice, our sessions provide a supportive space for growth. Join our community today and start your journey towards a more balanced and conscious life. Visit joegarner.net and sign up for our free weekly meditation. Find the link in the show notes.
Yeah. Is there anything you want to share on that? I feel like that was a big dump there, but how's that reflect in your experience and your journey?
Yeah, it's been a very similar experience for me. And, I think the first step is that reflective experience. So when I was partying, when I was too busy, when I just didn't feel like I had time to slow down enough, before I started meditating, before I started doing any type of journaling, reflective work, anything like that, there was never any time or experience or opportunity for me to say, hey, how am I feeling? Like, what did I just experience? Why did I experience that? It was just almost like one emotional reaction to the next emotional reaction with no reflection whatsoever. And then as you start to reflect, you start to see, oh, it wasn't the situation. It was something inside of me. Like, I assumed that person's experience or that person's perspective was this, and I don't know if that's actually true or not. I don't know if they were really coming at me because they had an issue with me, or because they had a tough morning with their significant other, or they got in a car accident an hour before seeing me, or any number of different things that are going on in their life. And it wasn't until I started to be able to put myself in other people's shoes, to take myself out of my own perspective and put myself into other people's perspective. And as the journey goes, you're able to do that more and more and more. Instead of doing it with people that you're familiar with, you can start to put yourself into people's perspectives that you've never met before, that you don't know who they are. And then as you start to experience this like change in perspective, or the empathic ability to put yourself into other people's shoes and try to understand where they're coming from, then all that perceived external pain and frustration and fear and anger that you think is coming at you goes away, because you realize that it's just a reflection of where they're at. It has nothing to do with you. You just happened to be in the room with them when they were there. And that was a huge shift for me, for sure. And I think it really does come back to that, you kind of started with it, the reflection of what you're experiencing, what you're feeling, what's going on in your life. And I'm curious as to what was the progression for you? How did you start to have that reflective experience, or to be able to take yourself out of that first person perspective and put yourself into a third person perspective, and then a fourth or fifth person perspective, like something outside of even the human race? What was that experience for you? What were some of the tools that you used on that journey?
I love how you're refocusing back on before you created space, before you slowed down to reflect, you were always going from reaction to reaction. And I think that's us going survival mode to survival mode. And, that's, I would say that that's one way our ego protects us. And I guess this is part of ego work. So I guess the module that I teach on ego work is ego has 3 roles. One of them is our sense of identity and individuality. Another one is it's our protection mechanism. So, for example, if we feel like someone, abandoned us because of we said something, then we learn not to say that thing because we don't want to feel abandoned. It's kind of like it's a safety thing, and it's a connection thing, and it's an acceptance thing, and there's so many reasons why we will, create a program or create a belief of like we need to behave this way to avoid this or to achieve that. And the last one is the ego is our inner critic, is our self-talk. And those are the stories that we tell ourselves, again, for protection, but usually because from a young age, we are exposed to very strong opinions or criticisms or judgments, and they become, it's almost like our subconscious brain, particularly from the age of 0 to 6 or 7, we're in theta mode, our brain's still developing, and it's just a sponge. It literally is like this unfiltered, like, supercomputer that's basically whatever anyone says, we believe, and it gets anchored in there. This is why doing that inner child work, doing that kind of looking back and younger age stuff is important, because there's a lot of things that just bypassed conscious mind because it was just part of our environment, epigenetics. So what was my process? It's interesting because I went to a Buddhist retreat, and, they were saying, be the observer, be the witness, meditate. And I was in that meditation. It was like just a 3-day one, I did 10-day one Vipassana. But I was sitting there, I was like, man, I've got so many thoughts. And I was like, I'm not doing it right. I'm not meditating right. I need to have no thoughts. And like, I kind of found it, I understand how valuable meditation is, and I use it as a tool now. However, there was so much junk in the way. There were so many layers of thoughts. And I was like, man, like every time I sit down to meditate, I'm battling against them. So I thought, instead of battling it, why don't I just like meet it and listen to it and then confront it? So one of the first exercises I did, and I learned this from, there's so much information out there. Thankfully, now that we've got the internet to be able to try lots of different tools, was meet your ego. And it was an experience where I know the character, the alter ego version of me when I'm, angry. And I think this is it. There's the ego is your sense of identity. So what was beautiful to understand and to learn was we can have an inflated ego, so like imbalance. So I guess it's like so much so self-centered, inflated. And then we can also have a weak ego, which is like insecure and feeling like, oh, no, I don't have any confidence at all. And then we've got an underdeveloped ego, which is like, I don't even know who I am, but other people tell me who I am. So, one of the most profound kind of things when I was starting this was that there's such thing as a healthy ego. Because in the spiritual communities, a lot of times they say, kill the ego, ego death. And like, we need to go from ego to spirit. And I believe that to a degree, but I think my approach to inner work is different because I feel like the ego, like this, I am trying to like, I believe that ego can give you wisdom. Through the individual experience, we can learn a lot about who we are through contrast. And we learn through suffering, pain, what we don't prefer. So by experiencing, some of our, dark night of the soul or some of those moments that we find really challenging, we can say, I don't want to be this. I don't want to align with this. I don't enjoy this. So what other option do I have? I think through that process and this is what's interesting because we talk about ascension and we talk about 3D to 5D, unity consciousness. And in 3D, we have the really unique opportunity to really explore individuality. And in the spiritual wellness, self-development world, there's self-reflection, self-realization. There is like self-care, self-love. There is a lot of things that are about the self. And I think that's part of our graduation. We need to master the self-mastery, ego mastery, the experience of individuality, mastering what it is to be an individual. And that's part of, I don't know if it's like a credential. I don't know if it's a mandatory to kind of move into unity consciousness. But through that self-mastery, you're not bringing any baggage or wounding into a state of unity. You're not projecting any trauma. You're not, and I think this is why there's, in that state of unity consciousness, things like greed and war don't make sense anymore because you're like, well, you're also me. And if you're also me and you've come into this wholeness and then, you understand that other people are an extension of you and that the planet is an extension of you and the cosmos is an extension of you, and going from, if the individual is in survival mode, fight and flight mode, it's always going to be it's always worried about self-preservation. When we do the healing work, we're starting to kind of shift our focus and saying, okay, I'm not always paranoid about what could go wrong. I'm not paranoid about my own safety and my own status and my own power. And then all of a sudden you can start being empathetic. It's hard to be empathetic if your needs aren't met. It's hard. It's hard to prioritize someone. Actually, that's not true because some people have codependency and people pleasing. Some people are so attuned to other people's happiness that they, betray their own needs or self-sacrifice. So that's not true. There are different ways. And this is why I think the ego is in such an interesting area of study and self-reflection, because everyone's got an ego and everyone has a different expression of that. So the narcissist has something to teach the empath, which is probably more about, hey, I can like my needs, and not even my needs, but my wants are important too. So, and obviously the empath has a lot to teach the narcissist about, considering more than themselves and putting themselves in other people's shoes. I think this is why in the 3D realm, it's about balance. It's about coming into and understanding the wisdom and the higher expressions, the healthy expressions of both masculine, feminine, narcissist, empath, all the different polarities that we've got going on. So yeah, looking at the ego and then giving the ego a voice and a name. So my ego's named Leo, and because I know that it loves to be limelight, loves to be in attention, but it's so insecure. Like it's so like I'm worried about how other people are going to perceive me and if I'm going to like leave the right impression. So there is this like desire to like want to be seen and acknowledged and recognized, but then at the same time, there's always this like insecurity about how other people receive you. So on the path, authenticity is so important. There's so many like different keys and codes that like you pick up along the way to help you really like have the embodiment of like self-knowing and self-wisdom. So naming my ego can help me. So in the situation where I got triggered, I would ask, okay, what's Leo thinking now? And I would actually give the microphone, like sit down in a safe, quiet space, visualize or just write down a lot of journaling. Leo, what do you want to say? This person's this person's a bit, this is whatever it is, but uncensored, because I think part of like the process was there's a lot of suppression that we do. There's a lot of suppression of our thoughts. We shouldn't think that. We shouldn't feel that. We shouldn't express that. We shouldn't say that. And yes, we shouldn't, express things or say things directed at people that could possibly cause harm. But we need spaces where we can just vent, because energy, anger, or grief, or sadness, or whatever it is, fear even, if we don't give it a safe space to like transmute, to actually take form, it's going to get stuck in the body. And there's a lot of different people that are exploring somatic healing, where emotions get stuck in certain parts of the body, chakras, organs, that kind of thing, and create certain. And there's a whole science to that. I think for me, it was about, okay, what's my ego saying, and what's the core wound beneath that? And then I started to take it on a journey. What's the judgment in that? What's my nervous system need right now to be able to self-soothe myself? Because again, like I can't heal myself if I'm in a state of, paranoia or survival. So basically, this just goes back to the inner work framework. I had like 20 steps that I would literally walk myself through, just because I knew that in the moment, in the heat of the moment of my trigger, I'm not able to think straight. I'm not able to be that third person witness. So I gave myself a process, and literally it was like a document on my phone where I would just duplicate and take my through question 1, question 2, question 3, set myself through it. And by the end, I was like, oh, it's because of this. Oh, it's this theme. Oh, it's because of that trauma. And then, oh, my inner child needs this. Oh, I need to reparent myself in this way. I need to give myself something that I've never given before. And, I need to step in and step up as the parent that I was never, I never experienced. And then this is how you create the healing and wholeness within yourself. So at the end of that process of like giving yourself what you need, I think there's a beautiful opportunity, because now that your nervous system is calm, now that you have more understanding and knowing of, where that wound and what that pattern and what that almost is like, what that history of that, because you can see it expressed in, all these different circles, in different situations, across your history of time. And then it was like, how do I go into a big picture? And like you were saying, into like, your third person perspective, your fifth and sixth, whatever. Then it was like, why did my soul give me this in the first place? Why did I give myself this challenge and this mirror and these people, these teachers? I learned to flip it from, I don't want to get triggered, stop triggering me, you did this to me, rather than, and then I moved that into, who is this teacher showing up for me right now? And if there's resistance, how am I not seeing what they're offering me? Because if there's resistance and there's like an emotional response there, there's some kind of friction, tension, wound there that is a blind spot. So in that, I'm like, okay, what is the higher perspective? What is the soul given me? Why did I give this to myself? And there's a lot of accountability there. There's something really beautiful in saying, how do I take full ownership of this situation of my life? And how do I say, how beautiful was this whole experience to show me this pattern, this theme, this wound again and again and again until I saw it and until I healed it, until I brought myself into that wholeness. And then next time it shows up, it kind of just washes over you. It's like, I've been there, I've done that, I understood it. Like, it's good, it's complete. And you don't need to tangle with it anymore. You don't need to dance with it anymore. So that wisdom is often, it's like, how do you come back to love? And sometimes it's how do you show love to others, but many of the times it's how do you show love to yourself? So I think the path of inner work is also the journey to self-love. How do you learn to love yourself unconditionally? Because many of the times the love that we received was conditional or came with the layers of, our parents or societies or our friends or our partners, their junk as well. So it's just cleaning the lens so that we can see clearly. And when we learn to love ourselves at that level and keep deepening that capacity for, acceptance, non-judgment, forgiveness for ourselves, the guilt, the shame, all those heavy stuff. Once we really get comfortable going there and then being able to accept it all, non-resistance, then it's so much easier for us to give that to other people. And again, this is how doing the internal work, we can actually model a completely different way to other people, which changes our reality, which changes their reality because they might have not seen someone embody and model that in their reality, in their circles, in their environment. Does that give you a little bit of the overview?
Yeah. I think that's just some practical ideas. Again, naming the ego, naming the ego and having a conversation with it, whether that's through an internal conversation, or you're journaling or writing down. I remember doing journaling experiences where I had to name all the different emotions that would show up, and I would name the emotion and then kind of give a backstory of what that emotion was and how that emotion came into me. And it was a very liberating experience because I realized, oh, wow, I'm not an emotion. I'm, this human being that is experiencing an emotion. So that emotion can come through me. I can experience it and I can learn from it, but I don't have to be an angry person. I don't have to be an asshole. I don't have to be all these different emotions that I attached to. I would say I'd attached it to my ego. I had said, this is who I am. I'm always going to be a short-fused, frustrated, opinionated person. And then all of a sudden, I started taking a step back. I named them. I realized that they aren't me and I'm not them. And that's when it got easy to kind of, separate myself from them and be able to see when I got triggered, when that emotion showed up. So yeah, naming each one of them, your ego, your emotions, all of these, different ways to kind of experience or separate yourself out from this idea that you're just this one individual and that what you're experiencing, everyone else is experiencing. That was kind of another step for me along that journey was, I'm experiencing this, but that doesn't mean that everybody else around me is experiencing it. I'd projected my experience onto everyone else in my life and thought, oh, that's just normal. And then when somebody would have a response or a reaction that didn't fit with my worldview, I'd say that I can't even understand that person. And then I love what you said about the idea of doing the internal work, and then you become a mirror that reflects back to somebody else who maybe does have that short trigger or these emotions that are stuck inside of them. You become that mirror for them to say, okay, I actually can. I don't have to react this way. I can care, I can slow down, I can show another person that it doesn't have to be that way. And again, not being attached with that outcome of, well, I have to save this person from their emotions, or I have to make sure that they get what I'm trying to tell you, because that you're just going to cause even more frustration and probably triggering yourself even more if you try to do that. But just non-attachment. Decide, I'm going to show up, I'm going to be this person. And the people that enjoy that, the people that want to be around me are going to come around me. And the people that don't are going to naturally kind of diffuse away from me. And that's okay. Again, the ego wants to be liked by every single person. It's like, well, there's 8 billion people on the planet. Nobody is liked by 8 billion. I mean, America can't even get 50% of a vote on half the elections that they have. So, again, this idea that we've got to be liked by everybody is just a core wound, definitely one of those childhood woundings that because this group didn't like me or didn't invite me into a circle or experience, didn't want me as a part of their group, then now I have to go out and be a part of everybody to prove that I'm worthy enough to be in that group of 6 or 8-year-olds, even though they didn't necessarily care that it was me or not. All they cared about was maybe I just didn't have something to offer them that they wanted. The story can be all of these different things. So, these practical tools are so helpful and so needed right now. And, it sounds like you teach a lot of those in the Academy of Transcendence and through your different books. So one of the things that we kind of talked about before we came on was this idea of what happens after the healing. And I think this is something that not a lot of people talk about. You have this healing experience, you have this self-reflection, you're able to take the ego out of the driver's seat and put them in the passenger seat or in the back seat, and your soul, your authentic being is able to kind of take the wheel for most of the drive. Now what happens? Like what is that next step, and what has your experience been as you've been this, kind of healed being?
I think less about healed being and just feeling confident that I've got tools to call on, to reach for when I need it. And I think the universe is going to keep throwing you situations like boot camp. You're talking about Thanksgiving. We've got Christmas coming up here, and I think what is it? Ramdas says, if you think you're enlightened, spend a week with your family. So I think because that's where we learn. That's where we've picked up a lot of our triggers and a lot of our behaviors, and that's where a lot of our old relationships, old trauma signatures live. So part of putting it to the test is going back to those relationships and then seeing, okay, same energy, same trigger, same feeling within you, because it's probably taking you back to a child, in a teenager. There's so many different versions of us that are still kind of like, I would say it's like petrified, frozen in time because of an emotion that was challenging. So your question was what happens after healing, and I've got a lot to say about that because I went down this deep dive about creating these frameworks and doing these questions and reaching for my phone and taking myself through this process. And I would have done that like 50 to 100 times, like heaps, like every, I got themes for so many different things, and I was able to like see myself. And then I started holding space for others, doing one-on-one sessions and saying, okay, what's this? And I took them down the framework, and intuitively I was able to feel empathically where they're at. So it just helped me to see that there's so many different themes and trajectories, and I call them healing arcs that we can go through, whether it's abandonment or whether it's like lack of self-expression, self-love, self-worth, all these things. So I would say that I was addicted to healing. I was like, oh, everyone needs to heal. My mom needs to heal, my dad needs to heal, my family needs, my siblings aren't doing it. And yeah, like you mentioned it, savior complex. It's like, guys, this is so great. You guys should do this too. We're all broken. And in a way, I was thinking, I had this belief that it's like, oh, everyone needs to do this. I think I had to really reframe that, because one of the principles that I learned was the law of non-interference. And my ego would have said, you need to meet me where I'm at. You need to communicate the way I communicate. You need to, empathize the way I empathize. And I was expecting people to meet me where I was at, because I was like, okay, this is the better baseline for us to have interactions. It's the healthier one. And what I had to learn was that what helped me shift out of that ego human perspective was to go to the soul perspective and to understand that every soul knows, is overlooking and overseeing the higher self, is overseeing when certain situations, when certain obstacles, when certain lessons are coming into fruition. And then there's the free will of the consciousness of the being to be able to actually apply themselves and take that on, or else it'll just come around in another cycle and another cycle. So I think there's this balance of free will of ourselves to engage with the healing process. And then at the same time, it's guided and supported, and we're giving opportunities to do that. So the law of non-interference, just to finish this bit up, was just to say that people's healing journey is none of my business. Unless they're coming to me and asking for help or support, there is no reason for me to project or impress or push my beliefs, my modalities, my, even my framework onto other people and says, you need to do this. It's their free will and their desire and their choice to actually want to meet the healing process. And for it to be a priority for them, it has to be there first. So I think, you have to want to heal to heal. So after healing, I was like, okay, I would say, okay, I think this is going to come back to Ascension. 3D is when you're unconscious, where you're just running around on survival mode. You've got all your defense mechanisms. You've got all your self-sabotaging beliefs, your, inner critic, your perfectionism, your low self-worth, whatever it is. And it's just playing out. And you're like, oh, I'm here again. I'm in this relationship again. I'm in this fight again. I'm in this argument. I'm in this situation again. And you're you're just kind of unconscious, and you're running on default. It's almost autopilot. So one of the things, the transformations of Ascension, is going from unconscious to conscious, going from autopilot to really intentional. Every single choice that you make, you understand the weight and gravity of your thoughts and your actions, and how that ripples out into your reality. So yeah, after the healing, the 3D, I felt like in 4D, self-awareness, awakening, conspiracy theories, just looking at things that were just a little bit not so surface level, not so superficial, and esoteric stuff as well. So, there's that deep dive into learning, but then you're starting to experiment and starting to try out different outfits, different choices, what that kind of opens up to. And it's a feeling out process. It's a trial and error process. I guess it's a practice. That's why I call it an inner work practice, because you're starting to you're trying to change beliefs and patterns and behaviors that you've been repeating for ages. The neuroplastic, the neural networks that you've created are so solid. And, we talk about neuroplasticity, the idea that you can change belief systems, which can create different circuitry in your mind, which can basically just change the way you think and feel, and then interpret and move through the world. So the 4D is that transformation time, the inner work time, the healing time, the awakening, the just the expansion of not so rigid thinking and a little bit more fluid. So I think I was at that 4D place at the end of my healing practice. Not the end, but towards the peak or the climax, or it's almost like the saturation of my obsession with healing. And then it was okay, what happens after that? I think once you, the real fruit of inner work is self-love, learning to love yourself more, learning how to come back to love, even if it's through such a meticulous and methodical, scientific method of the questions and the step by step. Some people are just oh, dance more, make music, sing, create art. And that's just many parts to healing. And I think like coming into mastery of the mind and the emotions and the energy was one part. Now the expression of the soul, authenticity, man, such a powerful word. How do you express yourself authentically, and how do you give yourself permission to be that, to live that? So it's less about learning, less about like absorbing new knowledge and trying new things, and now about applying it, embodying it, living it, and just being it. So you are not saying, I need to heal more. You just carry the frequency of what does a healed person look like, speak like? How do they show up? What are the things that they are, prioritizing and focusing on their lives? How are they making choices not from a place of scarcity, lack, or limitation? How are they giving themselves, backing themselves, trusting themselves to, like live boldly, live bravely, um, trust the intuition? And again, part of that 4D would be exploring your psychic senses. So there is that healing, but intuition's part of that. We have the 5 physical senses, and then we've got psychic senses, clairvoyance, clairsentience, claircognizance. And again, the inner work is starting to build a muscle, starting to train how you receive information, how you receive subtle energy. And this could be through downloads, this could be through visions, this could be looking at your dreams, your subconscious, meditation. There's so many different ways, even getting into creative flow state, in the act of creation. So there's so many ways that we can start to feel like a channel for higher intelligence, for energy, for creative energy, for source energy, for life force energy. And I think now we've got to a point where we love ourselves. We can recognize our healing and our trauma and our patterns when they come up, because they'll still come up, but they'll just be like, I would say, like less intense waves, and we can just ride them. Or just there's
Yeah, a bump.
exactly
A bump in the road.
exactly and we just know how to move through it quicker. And now it's about authenticity. So now from 3D, which is individuality and which is like ego focused, which I think is again got its benefits, now moving into unity consciousness. How do we come into a practice of integration? And I've got 5 I guess principles that I reach for to be able to apply practically in my life at certain times when it needs it. So I'll say the 5: non-judgment, and we learn that through shadow work. How do I not judge myself, and how do I not judge other people? A little practice to do that one is, shadow work has its own process. So there's many people talking about that. But like if you're in a conflict, can you introduce the affirmation, they are also me? Because that is such a quick shift of perspective. Because conflict requires, I'm this, you're that, we're going to butt head. If you're shifting into a higher frequency, a higher consciousness, and go, okay, I am source, I am a human, I'm part of the human race. They are also part of the human race with me. If you're feeling them and experiencing them and kind of embracing them from that level, they are also me. It kind of dissolves a lot of the friction. And I guess with non-judgment, I would say that there's a principle, non-judgment. We know what judgment is, because the reason why these are so powerful is because we've come through 3D. So we know what judgment is like. We know what it's like to judge ourselves. We know what it's like to judge others. So then we actually, through the experience of judgment, we know how to kind of like balance that or counter it. So non-judgment would be like, this is what I would do if I'm judging, and this is what I would do if I'm not judging. So it's almost like reverse engineering the way that you could choose to engage and approach a situation. Acceptance is the key. Non-judgment would be the way that you would approach it, the strategy almost. I'm going to choose non-judgment. And what I have to do now is to have radical acceptance. So, for example, if you're in some family issue, how do you say, I accept them for who they are, and because I love myself and I was wounded once, I can also see that they might be unconscious to their wounding, they might be projecting, and that's just where they're at. How can I still show them love? It doesn't mean that I need to tolerate what they're doing. And this is why part of that ego wisdom is knowing what your boundaries are. Because loving everyone, the empath can be a great, compassionate, yeah, I can use that belief, love everyone. But if it's at your expense, you're going to get so drained. You're going to get the energy vampires. You're going to get so depleted because you haven't learned what your personal power is. You haven't learned what your boundaries is. And you haven't learned what sovereignty means. So this is why I do feel like the self-mastery, the healthy ego mastery is important, bringing it into the fifth dimension, because we can't be codependent in the fifth dimension. You have to know how to hold yourself, how to hold yourself, not give yourself away, not give your power away to other people, not to self-sacrifice, not to betray your own needs. Like, know that you need to love yourself, and then with your full cup, that's when you can love others. Non-judgment, acceptance is a key. Non-attachment, we learned that through Buddhism. They're really good at just detaching from things and not expecting things. We've got non-interference, which I mentioned before, which is like not trying to control other people, not trying to change other people. And I think what's helped me is just understand that their soul has their own path, is leading them the same as me. Non-judgment, non-resistance, huge one. Non-resistance really requires us to tap into our feminine energy. We talked about receiving before, but how do we go into the flow of life rather than trying to use resistance as a goal that we need to achieve? Resistance training in the gym or whatever it is that, why do we need to make life hard? Why does life need to be a struggle? Why do we need to believe and buy into hustle culture? And I think that in that fifth dimension, if we have the belief that we need to earn something, the universe is going to give us experiences where we need to work hard for it. If we shift that, and I think this is why it's a paradigm shift. If everything is available to us in the present moment, if infinite abundance is here and available, the pathways, the portals, the different timelines are available to us in the present moment. The only thing that's kind of locking us into a slow, rigid, tedious, arduous kind of path is if we believe it has to be. And I think this is the beautiful thing. In the 3D linear reality, it takes a long time to achieve things. It can take a long time and it can require a lot of hard work. I think the beautiful thing, like the caterpillar, the cocoon is a different state altogether where it's kind of gone to mush, it's decomposed. The butterfly is different. And I'm just saying the fifth dimension is different. You don't think like a caterpillar when you're a butterfly. So we don't think in linear forms when we're in that unity consciousness. When we're unity consciousness, we are connected to source. We're connected to all the potentials, which means we can tap into them at any second if we change our frequency and if we align to it. The only thing blocking us is our conditioning, programming, and limiting beliefs. So if we can believe that we are worthy to receive that, if we deserve that, and we can really believe that, and there might be some ancestral stuff that we need to work through. There might be some parallel past life stuff, karmic stuff. We start to open up into lots of, rather than just the childhood trauma, we're starting to now absorb other parallel lives and how they might be bleeding through into our reality. So I think this is also part of the opening, the unfolding, the expansion of our consciousness to accommodate, to hold space for more than just our single linear human lifetime. And I think that's a pretty beautiful experience of discovery and exploration when we can say, I was also that, and I was also this, and I was also that. And I think we're starting to get closer to soul embodiment, where the soul has had all these incarnations, and you're starting to there's different ways, past life regression, there's I think galactic astrology, there's different modalities in which these can start to come through. I think for the people that are curious about that stuff, it might bleed through, through dreams and stuff like that. But I think doing the inner work first to get through the childhood stuff means that it's almost like a babushka doll. You open up the next level, you open up the next level.
Right.
That's my midnight experience. Maybe that's a really linear way to explain it, and maybe it doesn't necessarily need to be like that, but that's just been my experience. So
Yeah, I think there's definitely different people that come in and they have this galactic kind of experience, and because their childhood was so loving and caring, they never lost that, and they get to experience life through, not even knowing what it's like to not have that connection to your soul or your higher self, or your parallel lives. And I think it's fascinating to kind of see how those people show up in the world, and again, the lessons that they're experiencing because they design their life this way. When they do bump up against people that don't have this perspective, they might not have the ability to step out of their own perspective at that point to understand why this person is doing it. So then they take it so personally because they're like, I love everyone. I'm connected to everyone. How could somebody do this to me unless they actually just did not like me or enjoy me? So yeah, it's really cool to see everybody coming together and experiencing it from different levels, different perspectives, different lineages, different past lives, all like the totality of this is such a powerful experiment in the universe to have all these different perspectives on the same planet going through 3D, 4D, 5D at different times, at different rates, at different, even understandings or backgrounds. I think the journey as a Christian from 3D, 4D, 5D is way different than a Buddhist or a Taoist or, somebody who practices Islam. And those journeys are all different as well. And I'm not as well versed in all of those experiences or those religions, but I have a feeling that there are people similar to us that are in those religious backgrounds, that are in those societal backgrounds, that are in those kind of cultural backgrounds that are experiencing this, and they're taking their wisdom that they've learned and bringing it out into that public, into that culture or that religion or that experience, which just gives me so much excitement and joy, and hopefully as we continue to expand, we get to meet and talk and communicate with those different perspectives and see where they're at and what they're experiencing, and how Ascension from a Jewish community, an Islamic community, a non-religious community like ex USSR people and people that were told that religion is bad, and you'll if you practice religion you will die, we will kill you, to have that scar and then to go through an ascension process, I can't even imagine what that feels like. So as we kind of come into wrapping this up, I'm very curious, and I asked every single guest, we're going through this transition, we're experiencing this ascension. What do the next couple years look like for you, from a more macro, from a more zoomed out perspective, from a 30,000 foot view? What does life on Earth look like as we go through this ascension, as these old, patterns that have been ingrained in the human species either they shift into a new pattern, or they kind of just fall away to the wayside?
Great question. Okay, I think to just contextualize this one, cycles first, and I think astrology is a good reference point, or just a good tool to help us think about what key themes. Capricorn, which is a lot about top-down, capitalism, consumerism, kind of hierarchy. There might have been, I think in the Ascension circles, there's a lot of talk about Age of Aquarius and what that means for people. And also the term New Earth. So I think just the emergence of some of these concepts, some great people that have written about it, Dolores Cannon, Three Ways of Volunteers. There's so much there's so much interesting, juicy stuff. Like, I think we have to go from talking, as humans and then start to expand out to galactic, because as as of the time we're making this call, we're on the precipice of some disclosure. I know in the States there's all this drone controversy, which is an interesting thing to watch unfold for anyone that's kind of read into ETs, multidimensional beings, anything like cosmic secret space program, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. Again, 3D, the Matrix, the illusion, the superficial, getting deeper, conspiracy theories, and then maybe thinking, oh, there's a good guy, there's a bad guy, there's the cabal, there's the Illuminati, there's there's the antagonist, there's the elites. And then again, because if there is separation, if we're starting to create, there's discernment, we can understand that the nature of certain people, beings are to take for themselves, service to self. And then there is a growing awareness, a growing wave, a growing energy of service to others, which is that unity consciousness. And I think the easiest way to understand this is just recycling. It's probably the easiest example. There was a time when no one cared. There was no accountability for like recycling, stuff. And then all of a sudden, this wave of people saying, oh, this is how we're actually impacting the earth, the ocean, starting, and then humanity starts, okay, well, we're going to make that choice, that behavior choice to say that the earth is our responsibility. And I think that's just going to expand and expand, because all the corporations that are like, fossil fuels, the old ways of like, sustaining or energy really, and then going into like what are more sustainable practices. That's just a really simple like example. And I think on top of that, like, there's so much like social justice. So this wave of like, how do we go from survival mode, traumatized beings, to healing as a society, sharing with each other different tools so that, we can be empowered individuals, and then coming together without the baggage, or with less of the baggage, maybe not completely without, we're still moving, to be able to build a new infrastructure, new systems, new ways of, bartering, exchanging, eating, which are more conscious, which are more mindful. And then at the same time, how do we respect and how do we create a healthy society? We're seeing so much of that disillusion of, the big food companies, big pharma, the politics, the corruption, and how that has affected, uh, mm, it's touched everyone on the planet. I think now there's a real counterculture of what is real health, what is really important, how do we create not only like equity, but how do we create thriving communities? And I think that is part of New Earth, this concept, which is from the grassroots. People are going to come together, be able to help to resource themselves, and come back to like really human values. It's interesting because we're at a time of AI where all this technology is coming in, and there's like all these opportunities to be able to do things and learn things and to understand things quicker than we've ever had before. I think it requires the consciousness of the person to be heart-centered for us to create anything, a business, a venture, any type of initiative. I think this is why my work is all about the inner work, is how do we cultivate, how do we support individuals to be really heart-centered, to come from a place of service to others without detriment to themselves, so that they are healthy egos, and then build things, whatever that is, whether it's environmental, whether it's creative and expressive and artistic, whatever it is, it's coming from a heart-centered place rather than, external validation, or rather than power, greed, status. So I think this is the shift. The planet, and if we go macro again, we're getting solar flares, we're getting thrown so many cosmic energy, and this is helping to extend, but this is also purging a lot. So there's going to be a lot of weather. And this is interesting because it gets so nuanced. The energy is coming in, the planet as a being needs to purge out all the junk. So the volcanoes, floods, tidal waves, earthquakes, there's going to be that. But then we got to we can't discount that there is weather manipulation. This is about discernment. It's not about being the crazy tinfoil hat conspiracy theory. It's knowing that there are people out there that have weather modification technologies like HARP, chemtrails. There's geoengineering happening. So it's knowing that both are accelerating at the same time. There is the organic ascension as part of the planet, but then there's also the factions which are creating that resistance and trying to bring more control and fear to, I guess, distract people from claiming and really being able to access their ascension, their highest expression. Because when someone's an ascended being, when someone's a healed being, they're so much harder to control. It's easier to control people with trauma because you're scared of this, we can scare you, you're going to react. So really understanding that our trauma makes us really susceptible and vulnerable to manipulation. So moving forward, there are lots of talks in the spiritual ascension community that, there's solar flares coming, big solar flashes coming, which are going to, create lots of disruption. But in the chaos, it just means change. And I think this is it. Moving into a feminine energy state of being able to receive, surrender, let it flow, rather than holding on to what we were, knowing that we are doing and moving through a paradigm shift. And, your podcast being an amazing source for people to have these new, awarenesses, to put new things on their radar, to be able to say, okay, how is this evolving? How am I able to interpret it? Because you're not going to hear it on the mainstream news. That's not going to help you. They're the people that are just slow you down, really. But, moving forward, I think the exacerbating situations and tensions in war, in environment, in money, financial systems, economy, I think these are going to get more intense, which is going to make people go inward and have to focus on what's important and what makes us human. It's going to redefine what humanity is, because when all the glib and all that superficial stuff isn't important because your neighbor is, doesn't have food, or, everyone has to recover from a landslide, you really reprioritize, you really reframe what's important. And then the human connections, sure, technology can help, but hey, what does it mean to be human? And then when we've got ET disclosure, what does being on Earth mean? What do we want to define ourselves as? Guardians of Earth, occupants of Earth, inhabitants of Earth? What are some of those questions, though?
Defenders of Earth, which is one of the ideas behind it. Like, we have to protect ourselves from the ETs. It's just projecting that wounded experience onto just another, instead of it being against another human, it's against another being.
And we have to be really wary about that, because I think if I was going to say what's coming next year, there is going to be some psyops. There is going to be some manipulation around those are the enemy and we're going to protect you. So as a little warning, as a heed, my intel says that, we're going to, they have this technology, holographic technology, Project Bluebeam. There is potential to be, to have things shown to us that look like danger and threat. And again, and I'm going to offer this, to your audience, to the people that listen to this, in the same way that the pandemic created a lot of fear and control and coercion. Let's be super mindful. What have we learned? How can we be more discerning about where we give our power to, who we give our choice up to? And really navigate the challenges and trials that are coming to humanity, on the precipice of like this galactic awareness, seeing sprinklings of it already. And yeah, how do we respond to that? Are we responding with fear, separation, more kind of war and conflict? Or, how do we find the unifying aspect of that? And yeah, it's a question every individual has to answer. And, it's something that we can talk about to offer new potentials and ways of, I guess, contemplating it. But at the end of the day, every individual gets to choose. And I think that's the beautiful thing about Ascension. It's a personal journey, but we can all share it together. Do you have anything to add about that?
Yeah, we are all sharing it together.
Is there anything?
I think, you've kind of highlighted a bunch of different things, and I wouldn't say, I like that you don't dive into it. You just mention ideas about what could possibly be happening, so that, again, I think what a lot of people are doing, we're building these into the subconscious. We're like helping people understand that these might be potentials that could come down the road. But I think the biggest takeaway for all of this, when you're looking at what's happening into the future, like what are the potentials? What are the timelines that we're about to experience? Discernment is the number one key. Being able to discern what your truth is at that time without the influences of past lives, childhood traumas, the influences of everyone else in your world. If you can truly discern and then stick to that discernment, there's a very good chance that you're going to come out of this less scathed. I'm not going to say unscathed, but less scathed than other people that are buying into everything that they're hearing on every other external influence that they're able to have. So if you can tune into your own intuition, if you can find who you truly are, if you are your authentic self, you will be able to maneuver through this transition much more tactfully than those that are just getting tossed in the waves. It's the whole idea of the surfer versus somebody that just happens to be in where the waves are crashing. Like, if waves are crashing on top of your head, you're going to struggle to know where you are, to get out, to breathe, to continue to live. But if you're the surfer on the wave, you know what's coming. You're in the right position. You have the right board for the waves that are out there. Then you're going to be able to ride that wave in, hop off, paddle back out, grab another wave, ride that one back in, and you're going to enjoy this process. It's going to be an enjoyable process. And that starts with discernment. If you aren't able to discern that the waves are big and you need a 7.2 surfboard versus a 5.8 surfboard, you're going to have a much more difficult time. But that discernment kind of comes from within. It comes from being able to tune in, to zoom out from the third person or the first person perspective to that third person, fourth person, fifth person perspective. And that is kind of the key, I think, to this whole transition, the ascension, and doing it in a way that is enjoyable. I also believe that there are a ton of souls that have come to the earth to experience this from the other perspective, from the perspective of being a victim of, the government is going to protect us, and then have the rug pulled out from underneath them, which is, that's their soul's mission. That's why they're here. That's what they want. And, if that's the way that you want to go, I'm all for it. Like, that is your choice as a sovereign being to experience it from this way. And I assume, Kevin, we're not going to necessarily experience it from that way. We're going to use our discernment. We're going to kind of come into an understanding that this is happening. It's all happening for a reason, and it's going to be okay. At the end of the day, whether or not humanity makes it through this transition does not affect the totality of who we truly are. And I think that's a very unique way to kind of look at this whole transition. Just like you shift the way that you look at interactions between individual people, this is like the way that we're looking at interactions between cosmic beings, and it will be a very fun and interesting time on the planet for sure. Like I said, I think it's a very unique time to be alive as a soul in the physical incarnation, to be on the planet Earth during this transition, or this attempted transition or ascension or transcendent experience. So
Can I add something?
I'm excited for it. I'm ready.
I know that we've gone a bit
Yeah.
over. Just one last thought, because you were saying like the key. I really want to sprinkle some feminine energy into this. Two guys talking about ascension. I agree, discernment's important, but discernment is a masculine way, like masculine path of like being able to know your integrity and know your truth, and being able to see without attachment and neutrality. I think I think the key for me is the heart. If we're going into unity consciousness, if we're not going to fall into fear, if we're not going to fall into separation or judgment or blame, antagonizing who the enemy is, even like the fears, like it has to be from the heart. It has to be through love and compassion and unity and faith and trust and surrender. It has to be those qualities which lift the frequency and the consciousness, because that is the 5D consciousness. That is the ascended consciousness. It's not the mind consciousness. This last thing I'll leave people with is that my belief and my knowing is that humanity's already made it on another parallel lifetime, like in another timeline. It's already happened. There's too much of a motion and a movement and a momentum of humanity, and through the conversations we're having, through all the other people having these transmissions and ways of like supporting each other, it's moving. Okay, the mind has been super useful. The mind is the playground of the ego, thinking and discerning, and in a very way to separate, to understand, to identify, to classify, to categorize. It's a scientific thing. The mind is scientific. The heart is a unifying quality. It's a unifying, expression. It brings people together. Instead of looking at the differences, it's about what are our similarities? That shift, it's that paradigm shift into a different way of thinking. Instead of how do I survive, and how do we band together through this? And I think use the heart as the leader. The leader is not the mind anymore. It's not the strategist. The heart is, where do I go for my joy and for my love, and where do I go for the compassion, and where do I go to like experience and to bring more of that? And this is the divine masculine. How do I lead with love? Take action, take strong action, create boundaries, and then also take the practical steps to get there. So start with the heart. How do we unify? How do we expand? How do we support? How do we heal? How do we embrace and accept others through this, wherever they're at? And then hold the line, hold the frequency within ourselves so that we can model through the discomfort, through the challenge, a higher perspective, which is always going to be like, I can hold space for you. I can hold space for this because I know how to hold space for myself. And I think that is the true divine masculine, to be able to master yourself so that you can be a strong foundation and pillar for others during their trials and tribulations. So the heart, see the world through the heart, and then your frequency is shifting, and you're already creating the new earth, because you're living that way, that path, that worldview. So that's my key to the next year, 3 years, 5 years.
Yeah, beautiful. And I think those multiple keys, and that maybe these two, the masculine and the feminine, the whole idea is that they're coming together. Like, yeah, you have to have discernment, but have discernment through the heart. Like, don't have discernment as, how can I continue to live as this individualized human being? What's going to get me to live through this experience? It's what's going to get humanity through this experience. How can I show up and be there for others so that we can all make it through this experience?
Those who choose. And I think the more of us that light up and embody that, it'll just ripple out. It's like, it's just that rippling out effect. So, And I think that's on us. If we choose to model that, other people get to experience that, and they get to choose to model that. And then whoever chooses to go through the ascension will know, because they are around other people that are showing them a different way.
Yeah. Beautiful. Well, Kevin, this has been a wonderful talk. I know we did run over a little bit, and I appreciate everybody for sticking through the whole talk, but I mean, just wisdom after wisdom after wisdom, little nuggets sprinkled all throughout. So for those who want to get to know you a little bit more, who want to learn more about your opportunities, the Academy of Transcendence, where can they go to get more of Kevin Tran?
Thank you for asking. academyoftranscendence.com. We've got online courses for inner work. We've got a membership. You can come and learn about Ascension and then just receive Ascension updates month by month. And yeah, I'm writing a book. So on Substack, I'm sharing different articles, just getting into like some of the details and nuances of different things that, you know, I'm downloading and I just feel compelled to share. Instagram, another place that I'm sharing. And I've got a YouTube channel, which I would love to be honest, invite you on and get your side of the story, because, you know, we hardly got to scratch the surface on your stuff. Sorry that it's been a little bit lopsided. But yeah, maybe if you're up for it, I'd love to ask you some questions and then to let you kind of share your wisdom as well. So those are some of the platforms, and yeah, would love to meet more of your community and to collaborate where we can.
Beautiful. Yeah, I'm always in for another conversation, and just like you, I have no problem running on for 10 or 15 or 20 minutes. So it just kind of flows through me, and I'm sure it's the same experience for you. It's when you get out of your own way, the words just kind of come, and you know, it's hard to stop them. So like a faucet, you know, it's hard to turn off.
Yeah, sorry if it was a bit redundant.
It's good. It's good. It's bad. It can
Sure.
be, you know, it can be too much for some people, but yeah, it's beautiful. So again, I really appreciate it. Looking forward to working with you here in the future. And yeah, visit academyoftranscendence.com if you're interested in learning more about the products and offerings that Kevin has. So thank you very much. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thanks so much, Joe. See you guys.
Thank you again for listening to Changing the Channel with Joe Garner. If you enjoyed the show, please follow the podcast, hit the bell to know when a new show comes out, share with a friend, and rate us on whatever platform you're tuning in from. It helps get these messages out to more people to create the collective shift in reality we are here to experience. Make sure you interact with the Q&A and poll sections of the show so I can continue to provide content you enjoy. Finally, check out my website in the show notes to become a VIP of Changing the Channel and join the shift that is happening.